Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Edward Williams, creator and founder of Health by Any Means Necessary, and today we have a really good one for you. It's called The Truth About Salt. Now, before we get started, as always, please be sure to subscribe, share, like, and follow. If we are to improve the overall health conditions of our community, we have to make conversations like this popular. This is our community and it is our responsibility, therefore we cannot wait around for others to help us. Instead, we just have to put in the work, and what you're about to experience right now is that work. So let's get it. Out with the old, in with the new. For years, as pertains to high blood pressure and dietary advice, one of the most common recommendations has been to cut back on sodium. However, that recommendation has now been thoroughly debunked, in addition to being shown to have possibly caused more harm than good. Now the time has come to let go of this heavily flawed recommendation and replace it with the truth, which is going to be easier said than done because we have been thoroughly convinced that salt is evil. Now, before we really get into the subject, the first thing we need to understand is that salt and sodium are not the same. Now, when we're talking about table salt, salt is actually composed of two minerals, one being sodium, the other one being chloride. And so in the case of table salt, we have 40% sodium, 60% chloride. However, when we're talking about just sodium, we're only talking about sodium. Now, the way this works out as far as math goes, 1 teaspoon of salt contains about 2,300 milligrams of sodium. Now, even with that being said, for the sake of conversation, I will still use the two interchangeably. Now, of course, salt is nothing new. We're talking about a mineral that's been around since the beginning of time and has played major roles throughout history. In fact, did you know that the prefix for the word salary came from the word salt? Because people used to actually get paid in salt. African explorers used to trade an ounce of salt for an ounce of gold. Salt was literally worth its weight in gold. Also, the Latin word for health, salus, was derived from the prefix sal, meaning salt. And when you really think about it, salt makes up a huge part of our life. For example, most of planet Earth is made up of salt water. Your body is largely made up of salt water. When you cry salt water. When you sweat salt water. And if you have to go to the hospital to get an IV, then they give you salt water. So if salt plays such a huge role in our lives, then why is it so bad? Well, this is where the hustle comes into play, because we first need to ask the question of where is all this salt coming from? Where is the salt? Now, let's just say this was true. Let's just say that salt was the reason that we're seeing such high rates of hypertension. The question is, where's the majority of our salt coming from? You see, when most people think about decreasing their salt consumption, they are thinking about the salt shaker on the table. However, the salt shaker makes a very small percentage as it pertains to the overall salt consumption. Let's look at this pie chart. A 1991 study showed that 77% of the sodium intake in the American diet came from processed foods, while only 5% came from what was added during cooking and 6% was added at the table. Now, this is very different from what most people may have guessed. In fact, when I surveyed both my clinical patients as well as my online audience, over 72% of them believe that 50% of our consumption of sodium came from the salt shaker. Now, I personally believe that it's incredibly convenient to blame sodium as the culprit, while at the same time, 77% of that sodium is coming from processed foods. My question is there any chance that the other ingredients from the processed foods could be causing the increase in blood pressure? Well, we'll come back to that later, but I want you to keep this in the front of your mind. Now, continuing with the assumption that sodium is the problem, many may believe that they don't consume much of any salty foods, such as salty chips, pretzels, etc. However, if you are eating processed foods, it goes deeper than that. Processed foods don't necessarily have to taste salty for it to have a high amount of sodium in them. However, when we look at things like ramen noodles, soup, spaghetti, ketchup, bread, processed meats, and soda, it becomes obvious that the sodium is there. Even if it doesn't taste salty, it's still there. This is just another reason why processed foods simply can't be trusted. In my opinion, blaming salt has been used as a scapegoat and as a way to sell low sodium products. Because essentially you have the people who created the problem while creating profits now in charge of creating the supposed solution while still creating a profit. Now, I'm sure that's going to work out to be an honest exchange. From that, we now get an onslaught of low sodium products that show no improvement as it pertains to hypertension. Why is that? Because you can still buy low sodium products that still has highly refined processed carbs, trans fats, and other chemical irritants that will still have a negative impact on the endothelium, which in return will increase your blood pressure. The role that sodium plays in hypertension has been greatly exaggerated, all while ignoring the other more harmful characteristics of processed foods. The necessity of sodium. It comes down to this. Sodium is an essential mineral and it is extremely important. In fact, sodium is so important that our bodies will do its best to conserve sodium whenever low levels are detected. This sodium-sparing mode will ensure that the circulatory system can maintain osmotic balance as well as adequate blood pressure. Let's take a quick look at just some of the biological roles that sodium plays in our bodies, and you will understand just why sodium is so essential. Sodium is an electrolyte, which is a substance that carries an electrical charge and conducts electricity when dissolved in water. The electrical cells in our bodies are powered by sodium. Sodium is also essential for the creation of body fluids such as blood fluid, amniotic fluid, lymphatic fluid, etc. Sodium is also important in proper blood pressure regulation. Sodium plays a role in the transport of nutrients in and out of cells. It also aids in digestion and production of hydrochloric acid, cell-to-cell communication, bone formation and strength, nerve transmission and muscle contraction, brain-to-muscle communication, and the production of the glial cells in your brain, which are responsible for creative thinking and long-term planning. Now, those are just a few of these functions, but of course there's much more. Flawed science. Now, I know you must be asking yourself, well, where does the recommendation to eat less salt come from? Surely there must be some evidence, right? No one would just make this up. Well, you're right, but the evidence is downright criminal given the health implications of a low-sodium lifestyle. The Eat Less Salt campaign comes from a research of this guy named Lewis Dole. He did this very interesting research back in the 1950s where he gave 500 grams of sodium per day to rats. Now, that's right, 500 grams, which is, for humans, that would equate to almost 50 times more than our average intake. This study was then used as evidence to prove that sodium, high sodium, causes high blood pressure. Now, if that wasn't scandalous enough, the same guy followed up that research with another flawed study that claimed to show a correlation between populations with high average salt intake and high blood pressure. The problem there was that it was later shown that that study was full of scientific flaws, with the future analysis finding no association between the two variables. Instead, it showed that lower salt consumption increased blood pressure. More fuel to the fire was added to the Eat Less Salt movement in 1997 with the DASH sodium study. This is a study where the participants ate a diet largely made up of fresh vegetables, fruits, lean meats, whole grains, low-fat dairy, and very low in salt. And as a result, they were shown to have a reduction in blood pressure. However, there's a catch. The DASH diet was also low in processed foods, which is the true reason for the improvement. Look, here's the truth. Processed foods, when taken into the body, will act as a chemical stressor. Increases in blood pressure is only one of the many manifestations from that stress. A large part of this is caused by the imbalance between two minerals, potassium and sodium, as well as calcium and magnesium. As far as how this imbalance happens, well, it's pretty straightforward to explain. Most natural foods such as fruits and vegetables already come packed with the ratio of minerals that will be beneficial to your health, which is about 50-1. This means that for every 50 units of potassium, there's going to be 1 unit of salt. However, when we look at the ratio contained in the standard American diet, also known as the SAD diet, the average ratio is 1-2. This means that for every unit of potassium, you take in 2 units of sodium. This is literally a recipe for disaster, as the recommended ratio is at least 5-1. It's very crucial to also note that nowhere in nature can you find such high amounts of sodium without potassium to balance it out. With the exception of very few shellfish, no foods in nature has high amounts of sodium with little to no potassium. However, this disproportionate and unnatural sodium to potassium ratio can definitely be found in man-made processed foods. Salt and high blood pressure. Okay, so what does the science really show as pertains to salt and high blood pressure? In the NHANES-2 follow-up study, it was shown that consuming less than 2,300 milligrams of sodium, which is the recommended daily allowance, per day had a significantly higher mortality rates, meaning higher deaths, than subjects who were consuming 2,300 milligrams or more of sodium per day. Also, an analysis by the Cochrane Review involving a total of 6,250 subjects found no strong evidence that cutting back salt reduces the risk for heart attacks, strokes, or even death. In another study, the Cochrane Review 2011, the conclusions came down to this: cutting down the amount of salt has no clear benefit in terms of likelihood of dying or experiencing cardiovascular disease. Now, these are just a few of the studies that have been shown to debunk this long-held myth. Dangers of a low-sodium lifestyle. Now, this is the part I really want to emphasize because many of us are working hard to avoid salt with the belief that we are actually improving our health when in fact they may be doing more harm than good. Let's look at some of the potential dangers of consuming a low-sodium diet. Low sodium has been shown to increase blood pressure by stimulating the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone hormonal system. It has also been shown to increase insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Low sodium has been shown to increase LDL cholesterol and other inflammatory markers. Low sodium has been shown to increase your risk of dying from a heart attack or stroke. Low sodium diets have also been shown to have an increase in falls, unsteadiness, and attention defects in the older populations. What is the best salt? So now that we have shown you that salt is not the boogeyman, let's close all of this out with a solution and recommendations. First of all, regular processed table salt is better than no salt. But with that being said, processed salt actually rates the lowest as it pertains to health and quality. And this is because although 97% of salt is sodium and chloride, the other 3% are man-made chemicals such as moisture absorbents and flow agents. In addition to that, the processing also radically alters the structure of salt. However, when it comes to these next choices, not only is it unrefined and higher in quality, but it's also better for health. So what are your choices? Well, there's a whole lot. There's sea salt, pink salt, also known as Himalayan salt, gray salt, also known as Celtic salt, red salt, black salt, blue salt, and smoked salt. What you will notice is that none of these salts are naturally white. When you do see white salt, it's because it's been processed. In addition to that, these salts will also be rich in trace minerals and free of additives. How much salt? So how much salt should you be adding to your foods? The answer is as much as you want. Seriously, as much as you want. You should salt your food to taste. Once again, with the salts that we mentioned above, and only with real whole foods. You see, that's the catch. Real whole foods. And here's the truth. Most people would eat more vegetables if they felt comfortable with salting their vegetables to taste. And those are my recommendations. Eat real whole foods and salt to taste. You no longer need to feel guilty about using salt. The science does not support the initial claims. Summaries and recommendations. Don't believe the hype. It was never the sodium that was increasing your blood pressure. It was the processed foods. In fact, sodium may have been one of the most friendliest ingredients in there. My advice is to eat real whole foods and salt to taste using natural salt. In fact, you may find yourself eating more vegetables due to the fact that you can now add salt, and that would be a great thing. Alright everyone, this concludes our episode of the H-BAMN show. And if you like this information and you would like to learn more about these health topics while becoming empowered with the truth, then please be sure to subscribe and follow, as well as like and share this video. In addition to that, if you would like to get help improving your blood pressure, please be sure to check out our Pressure Tea subscription so that we can help get you closer to your health goals. And lastly, please be sure to share this video, as it is our job and our responsibility to improve our health conditions while ensuring that we create a better and brighter tomorrow for our future generations to come. Our community, our responsibility. And with that being said, let's get it. Peace.